Lady Death is the gripping memoir of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most lethal female sniper in history. Dive into the harrowing and heroic account of a young Soviet woman who became a legend during World War II with 309 confirmed kills. In this episode, Pavlichenko defends Odessa. Let's begin. Soviet military engineering units, sapper battalions, and residents of the city worked supremely hard in preparation for a lengthy siege. The foremost edge of the main defense line, an 80 kilometers perimeter and 3.5 kilometers deep, ran through the villages closest to Odessa. This line included 32 battalion defense districts, company and platoon style support points, and firing positions for artillery and mortars. By the 10th of August, they had managed to construct 256 reinforced earth, brick, and reinforced concrete firing points, and dug 1,500 earthworks for various purposes. These were connected by a unified system of trenches and long, winding communication routes. The trenches were full-size, over 1.5 meters deep, with walls reinforced with planks. There were also dugouts covered with 3 layers of thick logs. The flat expanses of the Black Sea steppes were crisscrossed by anti-tank ditches, up to 7 meters wide and 3 meters deep. In front of the battle positions, there were minefields and large areas with rows of posts strung with barbed or smooth wire. The second main line of defense was 40 kilometers away from the city, the third one at 30 kilometers, and the fourth 13 kilometers away. We had dreamed of fortifications like these. This dream had sustained us, both at Novopavlovsk and at Novi Artsis, as well as by the village of Starokazachye, when we were digging trenches at short notice with small sappers' spades at night by the light of the moon, or in daytime while being shelled by long-range enemy artillery, or when we were crossing the steppe highways with no food or water, burying our fallen comrades in bomb craters, or fighting off Nazis while trying to economize on cartridges. We believed that the chaos and disorder of the first days of war, caused by the sudden and deceitful nature of the enemy's assault, would come to an end. When and where they would cease, we did not know, but we had no doubt that some strong point would shortly appear along our difficult route, some inaccessible fortress, which we, having endured our baptism of fire, would defend to the last drop of blood. The audacious enemy would feel the true force of Russian arms. A state of siege was declared in Odessa, and then on the 8th of August. At the time, the military units of our 25th Chapayev Rifle Division, under the command of Colonel Akarenko, were located on the Belyaevka-Mangaim-Brinovka line. We repelled the onslaught of the enemy's superior forces and prevented the Romanians from breaking through to the south. A regrouping of Soviet forces then followed. The 54th Standard Stepan Razin Regiment, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel II Svidnitsky, though not all of it, joined a combined detachment under Brigade Commander S.F. Monakov, which was assigned to the Eastern Defense Sector, along with the 1st Regiment of the Naval Infantry and the 26th Endoidi Regiment. The 1st Battalion remained in its previous position and was used as a strike force, transferred from one sector of the front to another to take care of enemy breakthroughs. The core of the battalion consisted of our own 2nd Company under Lieutenant Dmitry Lubivy. Having received the order to restore the situation near village X, we would climb into our 1,500 kilograms trucks, though we more often went on foot, arrive at the destination, and go into attack to drive the enemy from the positions they had recently occupied. As a rule, we normally managed to achieve this. The company now had excellent armaments. We acquired a lot of weapons in combat, rifles of various models, machine guns, the German MP-40, more familiar to us under the name Schmeisser, Soviet TT pistols, foreign pistols such as Mausers, Berettas, and Steyrs, Nagant revolvers, DP light machine guns, and a large supply of cartridges. We had learned from our bitter experience of border skirmishes, and when the weaponry was insufficient, we created our own company caches. It was onerous to drag all this from place to place, but we did not want to surrender anything to the regimental store, although we were given all sorts of team talks. The battle readiness of our unit was largely facilitated by the closeness of its members' ages, upbringing, and education. Our ages varied from 20 to 25. We were all young Communist League members, mainly called up from the heavy industrial sector, or, like me, student volunteers from Ukrainian institutes of higher education. Our sense of army fraternity had been shaped in the battles by the River Prut. We learned to trust one another and knew that for us the maxim of General Suvorov, perish yourself but save your comrade, was an unshakable principle. In the breaks between engagements, we read letters from home together and also wrote letters together, even to our fiancés or fiancées. Everyone regarded it as his or her duty to come up with some striking or witty phrase. There were those among us who had a musical ear and a good voice, and we often sang together. The repertoire consisted of songs from the Civil War period or from popular films, The Woman of Warsaw, The Gun Carriage, and Over There Across the River, as well as Merry Wind from the Vanstock film The Children of Captain Grant, Broad is My Native Land from Alexandrov's Circus, The Blue Balloon, Twists and Turns from the Kozintsev and Trauberg film Young Maxim, and many others. The songs helped us in combat. There were times during heavy crossfire when someone would suddenly sing in your ear with a hoarse voice just one line from a favorite song, or call out as he walked past, "Hold your line, infantry," from the well-known verse, and instantly your heart would feel more at ease. Before an attack, you never feel particularly well. There is a sort of vacuum in your head. Your mood deteriorates. It is an oppressive and unpleasant sensation. In our company, we fought against this. We would relate every possible amusing tale, recall successful combat episodes, and not allow people to give in to anxiety. Then the voice of Lieutenant Lubivi would ring out, "Company forward, for the motherland, for Stalin, hurrah." Charging together, we would dash into battle and forget about everything else in the world. Hatred of the enemy overcame other human feelings, and the Romanians fled before us like hares. That is how exceptional our second company was. However boldly we Chapaevs fought, the harsh conditions of the battle for Odessa sometimes got the better of us. The enemy enjoyed superiority in artillery and, most important, had huge military supplies for ordnance and mortars, which the city's defenders lacked. Our gunners could only respond with one salvo to every 3 fired by the Germans and Romanians. Our company was once smothered by a wave of fire. It happened on the morning of the 19th of August. A mortar shell hit the trench parapet, not right in front of me, but about 2 meters to the left. The shock wave smashed my beloved rifle to smithereens, threw me backward into the bottom of the trench, and covered me with earth. I came to in hospital. My regimental mates had dug me out and taken me to Odessa along with other wounded and shell-shocked Red Army soldiers of the 1st Battalion. A wonderful panorama lay before me through the window of my ward, which was on the first floor of the hospital. The branches of apple, pear, and peach trees in an abandoned orchard swayed in the wind from the sea. The yellow leaves trembled, and the ripe fruit fell onto the ground. Little gray sparrows and black-headed starlings flew from twig to twig. They probably whistled to one another, but I couldn't hear anything. The mute spectacle of autumn asserting itself was soothing for some reason and conducive to reflection. My hearing returned slowly. The pain in my joints and spine tormented me at night. Lying on sheets crisp with starch in the clean and tidy room, and drinking the strong sweet morning tea, which was served at 8 o'clock, invariably with a bun, I recalled the hot step booming with explosions. Here, in the absolute silence, it seemed like a distant, strange, and even frightening dream, which bore no relation to reality. However, my comrades in arms were still there, and my place was among them. Soon, a number of letters from those dear to me were passed on to me from the regiment. My lovely mother, Yelena Trofimovna, was concerned for my health and advised me not to drink untreated water from open waterways on the march. My father, Mikhail Ivanovich, recalled the First World War and the Civil War, maintaining that the Belovs were always lucky in battle. My elder sister Valentina described how her work was going at her new place of employment. They were all a long way away from me in Udmurtia, where the arsenal factory had been evacuated from Kiev. Pulling myself together, I sat down to write back to them, trying hard to shape the letters with my right hand, which was gradually recovering its former strength and precision. The writing was a bit rough, but at least it was heartfelt. Valentina Mikhailovna Belova, Main Post Office, Votkinsk, Post Restante, Udmurt Republic. Dear Val, yesterday I made it out of the hospital into the city. I received Lena's postcard, which took a month and a half to get from Kiev to Odessa. Lena gave me your address. Why didn't you take her with you? I have already been in the army for a month and 10 days. I have succeeded in being nasty to the Romanians and Germans and spent time on the front line. The swine covered me with earth. Now I am in hospital. I leave in 2 days and go back to my unit, Pernturbis, where my special role is as a soldier sniper. Unless I'm killed, I plan to make it to Berlin, give the Germans a thrashing, and return to Kiev. My calculation is simple. 1,000 Germans, and then I can hold my head up with pride. It could be said that I have set my targets and will not retreat any further. In a word, I'm not bored. It's a merry life. If you can be bothered, write to me. Care of Chopak, Research Library, 13 Pasteur Street, Odessa. It will be forwarded to me. On the penultimate day of August 1941, I was released from hospital for the front line with a certificate testifying to my complete recovery from severe shell shock. I decided to visit my friend Sofia Chopak, who was still working at the library. On the way there, I was stopped twice by patrols to check my documents. Suspicion was probably aroused by my tunic, which had been cleaned in the hospital laundry and expertly ironed, and had raspberry-colored parade tabs sewn onto the collar instead of the regulation khaki-colored field ones. Or maybe it was my appearance. There were, after all, very few women in military service at the time. In the 2 months since the start of the war, the previously carefree and beautiful city of Odessa and its fun, loving residents had undergone an abrupt change. On some streets, barricades of sandbags had been erected and squares had been equipped with anti-aircraft guns. Many shops had closed, while others had their windows crisscrossed with paper tape. Holiday resort staff had disappeared. Parks, boulevards, streets, and squares were deserted. Only patrols of the Home Guard with rifles walked along the cobbled roadway. Industrial enterprises, the port, transport and communication facilities, and waterworks were under reinforced guard. The city was concerned about saboteurs, and not without reason. The Nazis had begun to bomb Odessa regularly. Several times somebody had sent them signals from the attics of multi-story buildings and directed the bombers to their targets. The port especially suffered damage in this way. In one incident, a small aircraft with no identification marks unexpectedly landed at Odessa's civil aerodrome. Our anti-aircraft defenses had, as they say, let it slip through. 17 Germans with submachine guns leapt out and opened fire. They tried to seize the airport to pave the way for another landing with a large number of troops. The soldiers of the Ilyich Destruction Battalion came to their senses fairly quickly. The enemy was surrounded and annihilated. The aeroplane was seized. The Fritzes never succeeded with any further landings. Sofia talked about this and much else when we met in the rare books and manuscripts storeroom of the research library. The place was really humming. The staff was filling large wooden crates with folios, leather folders containing ancient manuscripts, and various valuable curiosities, numbering them and compiling descriptions. After the announcement of a state of siege in the city, many cultural institutions, including the research library, began to prepare for evacuation to the Caucasus. Sofia Chopak had still not decided whether she would go too. This meeting of ours might even be our last. I spent the rest of the day pleasantly in the friendly and hospitable Chopak household, enjoying a modest supper in their restaurant's apartment in Greek Street. From the 25th of August, the Executive Committee of the Odessa Regional Council had made the sale of fresh bread, sugar, grain, and fats subject to ration cards. However, the famous market on Privo Square continued to operate. For now, it still sold everything you could want, but the prices had doubled or trebled. It turned out to be a quiet evening. On the 29th of August, the gunners of the destroyer flotilla leader, Tashkent, had smashed a Romanian battery that had been firing from the Bolshoi-Ajalik estuary. For 3 days, it had targeted the city, the port, and its main navigation channel, preventing the ships of the Black Sea Fleet from unloading new drafted battalions, weapons, ammunition, foodstuffs, and equipment for the besieged Soviet forces. As well as that, the coastal army repelled yet another Romanian assault, although the Nazis did manage to get closer to Odessa, to the town of Fontanka in the eastern defense sector, and the towns of Freudenthal and Krasny Pereselienets in the western sector. In the early morning, I got a lift out of the city on a truck headed for the Kuyalnik and Bolshoi-Ajalik estuaries. The command post of the 1st Battalion was located near a small village. I reported to Captain Sergenko that I had arrived back at my unit to resume service. I concluded my report with the words, "Read, Army Private Pavlichenko. The captain smiled. You've made an error, Lyudmila. What error, comrade? Captain. You're not a private now, but a corporal. Congratulations. I served the Soviet Union. I wanted to shout at the top of my voice with joy, Hurrah! But the done thing was to act soberly and with restraint. Still, it was my first army promotion. Having joined the Red Army as a volunteer, I had thought about a military career, but had not expected that my enthusiasm and success as a sniper would be appreciated by the leadership within just a month and a half. However, the big losses in our forces were conducive to rapid promotion up the service ladder, for those who remain alive, that is. The conversation at the command post continued, and I learned that while I had been in hospital, there had been changes in our second company. First, the commander of my platoon, Lieutenant Vasily Kovtun, had lost his life, and along with him, about another 30 men. It had happened during the bloody battles on 24, 25, and the 26th of August near the Koyalnik estuary. Secondly, the regiment had recently been replenished with volunteer sailors from Sevastopol. They were desperate to fight the enemy, but had no experience of infantry service. Other volunteers had also joined us, around 100 Odessa residents. I'm glad you're back in the regiment, said Ivan Sergenko. I was really hoping it would happen, and I've even got some presents for you. The main one is a new Mosin sniper rifle instead of that old broken one. Thank you, comrade captain. The second gift is simpler, but I imagine you'll like it too. The battalion commander handed me a small grey cardboard box, like those in which military goods are packed. I opened it. In it lay 2 brass triangles, the insignia of my new military rank. They needed to be attached to the empty raspberry-colored tabs in the top corners of my collar. Where could he have found such tiny metal things out in the steppe, which had been peppered by firearms and dug into trenches? The commander had shown concern for me, and this warmed my heart. Captain Sergenko was concerned not only about me, but about all the troops of the 1st Battalion. He was a very experienced, proactive, and strict officer, and a fair-minded man. When Lieutenant Colonel Svidnitsky was wounded and left our 54th Regiment, we all expected that the duties of commander, along with the rank of major, which was due to him in terms of service, would go to Sergenko, but the High Command decided otherwise and appointed Major N.M. Matusievich, who had a good few years on the clock and had taken part in the Civil War as a rank-and-file soldier in the 1st Cavalry Army. At the battalion command post, I attached the triangles to my tabs and set off for the firing lines of the 2nd Company as a uniformed corporal. Sergenko saw me off with some parting words to the effect that I should look out for people among the new recruits who were capable of being trained in the sniper's art. Sadly, in the trenches, only a few troops from the old contingent called out to me by name. The others observed me with curiosity. The seamen, who had been sailing the watery expanses until now, did not even want to change into khaki uniforms, or take off their peakless naval caps, their dark blue flannel jackets, blue and white vests, and wide black bell-bottomed trousers. While they were experts on ships, they had never held a rifle in their hands, and the words sniper meant nothing to them. Turning mariners into super sharpshooters in a short period of time was not, to be honest, an easy prospect. We began by persuading them to wear helmets, tunics, and boots instead of shoes. Meanwhile, the High Command of the Odessa Defense District had set some specific targets for snipers to occupy the most advantageous positions for observation and firing, to give the enemy no peace, to deprive him of the opportunity to move freely in the lines closest to the front, and to demoralize him. There was nothing new or original in this, but the theater of military activity itself, flat, steppe with the occasional hill, almost treeless, with sparse population centers, presented few opportunities for setting up snipers' hideouts, while camouflage could not have been more difficult. We had to look for other methods to combat the invader. We decided to set up hideouts further from our front line, to move them forward into no man's land, which was 600 meters away and closest to the enemy. We did this after thorough reconnaissance, which we carried out ourselves, closely studying the locality, determining its suitability for targeted shooting, and working out how to leave the hideout afterward and return to our own unit. I will describe our first such sortie as an example. Everything had been reconnoitered, and at night 3 of us set off on the mission. One soldier with a TRF infantry pattern light machine gun, DP, a sniper terminator, that is me, and a sniper observer, Pyotr Kolokoltsev. We had gas mask bags filled with cartridges, and grenades hung from our belts. Apart from a rifle, each of us had a TT, Tula Tokarev pistol, my handgun of choice, on account of its powerful cartridge. On setting up the hideout, we realized that not every shot might be the final one for the enemy. The accuracy of our fire would depend on many circumstances which were at times beyond our control. As a hideout site, we chose a thicket of quite tall, dense shrubs. It was in the shape of a diamond with a length of about 150 meters and 15 meters wide. One point of the diamond projected into the Romanian defensive line and ended in a shallow gully in the area of the enemy's second echelon. The hideout lay about 600 meters from the 54th Regiment's first line of trenches. It was quite a long distance, of course, but we had arranged with the machine gunners that they would keep us under observation, and at a signal from us, the raising of a small sapper's spade, they would cover our retreat. On exiting the dugout after midnight, we took an hour to cover the distance to the hideout. The moon, in the cloudless sky, illuminated the surroundings, and all the pathways, uneven patches, and shell holes showed up clearly. The quiet, warm, gentle Black Sea night embraced the countryside around us. Neither side engaged in the usual unsettling rifle and machine gun fire. All around it was so nice, so peaceful. Only the likelihood of a meeting with the enemy right in the shrub thicket spoiled our mood. We had to keep a watch as we strode along and had our weapons at the ready. There turned out to be no Romanians in the thicket. Why they had not occupied it and at least stationed an observation post there we could not understand. I attribute this fact to their gypsy fecklessness. The punctual and calculating Germans had tried and tried to teach their allies about modern warfare, but they had not succeeded. We devoted the rest of the night to preparing our positions. We dug trenches with small parapets, reinforced them with stones and turf, placed our rifles on them, got everything to fit, and worked out the distances. The machine gunner set his weapon up. It grew light. At 5 o'clock in the morning, There was some movement in the enemy lines. The soldiers walked around fully upright, talked loudly, and called out to one another. At 6 o'clock, a field kitchen arrived. Things became livelier. Officers appeared and gave loud orders. At some distance away stood what was probably a medical station. The gleaming white smokes of the medics were clearly discernible to us. All in all, there were a lot of targets. We divided our forces. The left flank would be mine, and Pyotr Kolokoltsev would take the right side. The machine gunner kept the center under observation. We waited till 10 o'clock in the morning, studying how the enemy behaved when they were some distance away from the front line, and then we opened fire. The Romanians got a real fright. For several minutes they could not work out where the shots were coming from and rushed around, intensifying the panic with their wild wailing, but we had measured the range and our sights were adjusted. Almost every bullet found its target. In approximately 20 minutes, Kolokoltsev and I took 17 shots each. The result, 16 kills for me, and Pyotr had 12. The machine gunner, who was supposed to cover us in the event of a direct enemy attack on our hideout, did not fire because there was no need. Pulling themselves together, the Romanians opened mortar and machine gun fire on the thicket. However, they could not see us, and therefore their shooting was off the mark. We had to get away. We made it back to our lines safe and sound, wrote a report for the regimental commander, and received an official message of gratitude for our bold action. We thought about it and decided to go again at night to the same place and lie in wait. We proceeded calmly, without getting nervous, but on arrival at the thicket, we became very alarmed. On the first day, we had taken water with us in bottles, but not brought the bottles back with us on our return. Instead of the 3 bottles of water we had left behind, we discovered 6 bottles, and all of them had held sweet wine. The bottles forced us to consider seriously, shouldn't we get out of here altogether? We also found 2 cartridges and a narrow furrow on the grass from a Schwarzlose machine gun. The trail led in the direction of the enemy. It was clear. The Romanian sentries had been here during the day. They had finally worked out that the thicket was a very vulnerable spot on their front line, but they had left for the night for some reason. They probably did not expect a repeat attack from the same position. We surveyed our sector again, convinced ourselves that everything was in order, and decided to stay. We opened fire at noon. It was a repeat of the previous day's scene. I had 10 kills, including 2 officers, while Pyotr Kolokoltsev got 8. This time the Romanians quickly recovered their composure and began to fire back at the thicket with 2 Memoirs machine guns. The rounds came closer and closer to our trenches. We ceased fire, withdrew, moved inconspicuously to one side, and approached the machine gunners from the flank. From a distance of 100 meters, we took 5 shots with our sniper rifles and wiped out the squad. Pyotr liked the enemy machine guns. They were quite new and all the components shown. In brief, we took 1 machine gun away with us and buried the breech block of the other. The regimental scouts later found it from our directions and took it as their own trophy, along with the machine gun. There were ample boxes of cartridges lying around, and the Austrian machine guns went on to serve the Red Army. It would have been irrational to use this spot as a sniper hideout for a 3rd time. Therefore, we found another one, a white house, which was half destroyed and had been abandoned by its residents. It stood in the same neutral zone. about 400 meters from the thicket. Having occupied it, we observed the following scenario from the attic the next day. At 7:30 in the morning, the Romanians unleashed a furious mortar attack on the thicket and thrashed it for about 30 minutes without a break. It is no bad thing when the enemy wastes ammunition to no purpose. For the 26 Romanians who would remain forever in the Odessa steppe, while my overall total was approaching 65, I did not feel that I was due any reward. In the first months of the war, we did not expect any decorations and thought more about defending our native land against the frenzied invaders. Later in 1943, after the establishment of the Soldiers' Order of Glory, it was awarded third or second class to those sharpshooters who had wiped out 10 or 50 to 70 enemy soldiers and officers. For example, 14 young women who were graduates of the Central Women's School for Sniper Training were given similar double decorations, first and second class. Only Sergeant Major Nina Pavlovna Petrova, though not a graduate of the Central Women's Sniping School, received the Order of Glory in all three classes, third, second, and first, the last awarded posthumously. Her tally came to over 120 Nazis. Within the 54th Stepan Razin Rifle Regiment, the most celebrated heroine at the siege of Odessa was not me, but machine gunner Nina Onilova. I'm an orphan who was brought up in a children's home and worked in an Odessa factory. Nina came to us as a 20-year-old in the second half of August 1941, along with other volunteering residents of the city, initially as an orderly in a medical company. Soon she requested a transfer to a field unit because she had studied machine gunning within the Olsoavakhim educational organization. She was registered with our battalion and served in the first company. So it goes without saying that we knew each other. Not having witnessed her feats myself, I would like to turn to the recollections of those Odessa veterans who saw Nina both on the field of battle and away from it. Vice Admiral Azarov writes, "They first began talking about her after the battle by the village of Gildendorf. At a critical moment, Nina and her number 2 in the detail, Private Zabrodin, wheeled their machine gun out into an open space and struck at the attacking enemy. Their firing was on the mark. The fascists went to ground and those who remained alive hastily crawled away to their own side. The attack was repelled." Lieutenant General Trofim Kolomiets recalls, "When I returned to base, the head of the political section, Senior Battalion Commissar N.O. Berdovsky, called in. With him was a girl of short stature in a Red Army uniform. Catching my inquisitive eye, Berdovsky introduced her. Machine gunner Nina Onilova of the Razin Regiment. During the defense of Odessa, she was wounded and evacuated to a hospital in the rear. Now she says she's fit and well." So that is what she was like. This Nina Onilova, who was nicknamed Chapayev's second Anya and had shot hundreds of fascists. To look at, just a young girl with a round suntanned face, laughing eyes, and charming with a slightly embarrassed smile. In the coastal army, there was probably not a single soldier who had not heard of her. The young Communist League organizer in our regiment, Yakov Vaskovsky, described the actions of the gallant Nina in greater detail in his own memoirs. A further enemy attack caught me at the command post of the 1st Battalion. Battalion Commander Ivan Sergenko, who was observing the field of battle through a crack in the wall, suddenly shouted menacingly into the telephone receiver. "Why is the machine gun on the left flank not firing? Check it immediately. Fire it yourselves if necessary." This was addressed to the company commander, Lieutenant Ivan Grintsov. He ran along a trench on the left flank. The situation was truly dangerous. Apparently, noticing that the fire there was not as strong, the attacking fascists had begun to move towards that side. The machine gun detail was new, having only just joined the battalion, and the company commander had not had time to get to know the personnel before the battle. Running up to the machine gunners, Grintsov saw that the first one was bent over and not moving, while the second was standing around at the back, as if nothing was the matter. "Still too far away. Let them come a bit closer," said the first machine gunner in a completely calm tone, without turning around. But there were only some 70 meters to the enemy ranks. Grintsov could not restrain himself and shouted, "What are you doing? They'll pepper you with grenades any minute." He was ready to push the gunner out of the way in order to open fire himself. But at that moment, the machine gun started up. The enemy troops were gathered in a narrow sector. The first round mowed down almost half of them. They were so close that they had nowhere to hide. The last ones fell about 30 meters from the machine gun. There was a shout of "Hurrah!" from our trenches. Nobody in the company, it seems, had seen machine gun fire like that. "Well done!" Grintsov exclaimed. "Just look how many fascists are lying there. A medal's not good enough for you." The gunner finally turned to the company commander, who beheld before him a young woman, sun-tanned, with a cheerful round face and hair cut short like a boy. Soon the entire regiment knew about machine gunner Onilova, Chapayev's Anya No. 2, and then so did the entire 5th Rifle Division. Nina Onilova received the Order of the Red Banner quite soon, too, in December 1941, on the front at Sevastopol. According to data from the defense of Odessa, on that occasion, some 10 soldiers from our glorious and courageous regiment, which had sacrificed itself for the city and borne significant losses in battles with the fascists, were awarded decorations. To be honest, not all of us were ecstatic about Nina's tactical innovation. Captain Samon Sergenko was particularly nervous. Onilova occupied a single machine gun nest, but he was responsible for the entire battalion's front line. Summoning the gunner, the battalion commander praised her for her boldness, but warned her that firing from such short distances during frontal attacks by the enemy was a very big risk. Moreover, a separate group could burst in from the flank and pepper her with grenades. The Maxim fixed machine guns in the regiment were quite old, of pre-revolutionary vintage. Their mechanism frequently failed when under heavy load, and if that happened, nothing would save Nina and the other troops with her. She was not starring in the film Chapayev, in which the whites never made it to the red lines. This was real war, and situations on the battlefield could develop in different ways. As a result, Onilova was not often permitted to employ her innovative method and was forced to observe service instructions to the letter. However, it no longer mattered. The widely distributed newspaper of the 25th Division, the Red Army Soldier, and then other military publications printed enthralling tales about the deeds of this courageous girl, and political staff concerned with propaganda within the army made great capital out of the image of this remarkable machine gunner who was inspired to great feats by the romantic heroes of the Civil War. But nobody saw anything romantic in the sniper's art at that time. In the first place, the word sniper was alien and incomprehensible. Secondly, the operations of a machine gunner and a machine gun were full of action and looked much more interesting than firing from a hideout. A round of fire crackled, and a swathe of the enemy instantly dropped to the ground. The way a sharpshooter could take out an officer in an advancing line, thereby choking the attack, could not be so picturesquely presented. Thirdly, there were the snipers themselves. What sort of people were they? Taciturn, unsociable, even morose. They were incapable of describing in detail precisely how they hunted the enemy. Note that they were allowed to do this, incidentally, having signed the official secrets clause. This concludes the fourth part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Pavlichenko's story? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.